I won the lottery but let him think I was broke. The sound of my son's voice that morning still echoes in my mind like a ghost that refuses to leave. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Margaret, and I'm 72 years old. I live in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on Northern Boulevard in Queens, where the walls are thin enough to hear Mrs. Chen arguing with her husband in Mandarin next door. And the radiator clanks like an angry spirit every morning at 5:30. The building smells of curry and old carpet, a mixture that used to comfort me but now just reminds me how small my world has become. That Tuesday morning in October, I woke up the same way I had for the past 3 years since my husband Richard passed. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through my dreams at 6:15, and I shuffled to the kitchenette in my worn pink slippers, the ones with the hole near the left toe that I keep meaning to throw away but never do. The coffee maker gurgled to life, and I stood there in my faded blue nightgown, staring out the window at the endless stream of cars on the boulevard below. I was stirring my coffee with the bent spoon I'd been using for 20 years when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Michael, my son. My heart did that little skip it always does when he calls. That foolish flutter of hope that maybe this time, just maybe, he was calling because he missed me. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, trying to keep the eagerness out of my voice. "Mom, listen, I need you to stop asking me for money, okay? I've got my own family to worry about." The words hit me like a slap. I hadn't asked him for money. I hadn't asked him for anything in months. "Michael, I didn't—" "Look, I know what you're going to say, but I'm tired of this conversation. I'm doing fine. Sarah's doing fine. The kids are fine. We don't need you sending us $20 bills and birthday cards or offering to help with groceries. Just stop, okay?" My hand trembled as I held the phone. I just thought maybe— "Mom, I gotta go. I'm late for work." The line went dead. I stood there in my tiny kitchen, holding the phone to my ear long after the dial tone began, as if somehow the connection might miraculously return and my son might remember that he loves me. I set the phone down on the chipped Formica counter and noticed something white fluttering near my feet. It was a lottery ticket, one of those scratch-offs I buy sometimes at Rodriguez's bodega downstairs. $5 for a moment of hope. That's how I justify it to myself. Usually, I win nothing. Maybe $2 or $3 if I'm lucky. This ticket had been sitting on my counter since Saturday. I'd forgotten about it completely. With shaking fingers, I picked up a penny from the jar where I keep my loose change and began scratching off the silver coating. The first number matched. Then the second. My heart started beating faster. The third number. The fourth. The fifth. All matching. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. But there it was, clear as the morning light streaming through my window. $500,000. $500,000. I'd won $500,000, and my son had just told me to stop bothering him with my poverty. I sank into my kitchen chair, the one with the wobbly leg that I've been meaning to fix for years, and stared at that ticket. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, suddenly wealthy, and the person I most wanted to share the news with had just hung up on me because he thought I was a burden. You know what the worst part was? A tiny voice in the back of my mind whispered that maybe now, maybe with this money, my children would finally want to spend time with me again. And that thought made me feel sicker than any lottery win could make me feel happy. I want to tell you how I got to this place, living in this small apartment with its peeling wallpaper and broken dreams. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever wondered if the people you love most in the world only see you as an obligation? Because that's exactly how I felt that morning, lottery ticket in one hand, dead phone in the other. My story with Michael began 38 years ago when I held him in my arms for the first time at Mount Sinai Hospital. He was 7 pounds, 2 ounces of pure miracle, with tiny fists that grabbed onto my finger like he never wanted to let go. Richard cried when he first saw him, actual tears streaming down his face as he whispered, "He's perfect, Maggie. Just perfect." Those early years were hard but beautiful. Richard worked construction while I stayed home with Michael, then later with Sarah when she came along 2 years later. We lived in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Astoria then, and I remember thinking we were so rich because we had love. Love filled every corner of that cramped space. Love made our second-hand furniture feel like palace furnishings. When Michael was 5, he caught pneumonia. I spent 3 nights sleeping in a hospital chair beside his bed, holding his hot little hand and singing the lullabies my mother used to sing to me. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine," I'd whisper, watching the rise and fall of his chest under the thin hospital blankets. When he finally opened his eyes and said, "Mommy, I'm hungry," I thought my heart might burst with relief and joy. That's what mothers do. We hold vigil. We sacrifice sleep, comfort, our own needs, because our children's well-being matters more than our own survival. I thought that's what love was supposed to look like. I thought that devotion would be remembered, cherished, returned someday when I needed it most. Richard and I scrimped and saved to move to a better school district when the kids were in elementary school. We gave up date nights, vacations, new clothes, anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Every spare dollar went toward their future. Piano lessons for Sarah, baseball camp for Michael, tutoring when they struggled with math. We ate macaroni and cheese for dinner more nights than I care to count so they could have opportunities we never had. Michael was a good student, not brilliant, but hardworking. He played JV basketball in high school and had dreams of playing college ball until he grew only to 5'8" and realized the dream was beyond his reach. I watched him struggle with that disappointment, watched him learn that life doesn't always unfold the way we imagine it will. I held him while he cried after the coach cut him from varsity, and I told him he was perfect exactly as he was. When he graduated from high school, we took out a second mortgage on our house to help pay for his college education. Queens College wasn't Harvard, but it was a good school, and we were proud. So proud. Richard worked extra shifts, and I took a part-time job at the local library to help make ends meet. My feet ached every night from standing behind that circulation desk, but it was worth it to see Michael walk across that graduation stage 4 years later. Sarah chose a different path. She got married young to Tony, a sweet boy from the neighborhood who worked for the sanitation department. They had their struggles, but they seemed happy, at least in the beginning. I helped them with their wedding, spending money we didn't have on flowers and a decent reception, because I wanted Sarah to feel like a princess on her day. After college, Michael got a job at an accounting firm in Manhattan. Nothing glamorous, but steady work with benefits. He married Jennifer, a nice girl from Long Island who worked in marketing. They had a small wedding in her parents' backyard, and I contributed what I could, though it wasn't much by then. Richard's health was starting to fail, and the medical bills were mounting. Here's what I remember most clearly about those years when Michael was starting his own family: the phone calls. He used to call every Sunday evening, religiously. We'd talk for an hour sometimes about his work, about Jennifer, about their plans for the future. When their first child was born, my grandson David, I was one of the first people he called from the hospital. "Mom, you have to see him," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "He's got your eyes, I swear. Dad's stubborn chin, but your eyes." I took the subway into Manhattan that very day to visit them in the hospital. I held my grandson and felt that same overwhelming love I'd experienced when Michael was born. This tiny person was connected to me, part of my legacy, the continuation of our family story. But somewhere along the way, those Sunday phone calls became less frequent. Once a month, then every few months, then only on holidays. When I called them, the conversations grew shorter, more strained. Michael always seemed to be rushing somewhere, had something more important to do. "Mom, can I call you back? David has practice, and we're already running late." "Mom, it's not a good time. Jennifer's family is here for dinner." "Mom, I'm swamped at work this week. Can we catch up later?" Later never came. Richard's death 3 years ago changed everything. The funeral was well attended. He'd worked in the neighborhood for 30 years and everyone knew him. Michael gave a beautiful eulogy, talked about what a good father Richard had been, how he'd taught him about hard work and integrity. I was proud of my son that day, proud of the man he'd become. But after the funeral, after the casseroles from neighbors stopped coming, and the sympathy cards stopped arriving, I realized how truly alone I was. The house felt enormous and empty. Every creak of the floorboards, every tick of the clock on the mantel seemed magnified in the silence. I called Michael that first week, struggling with grief and the practical matters that death leaves behind: insurance papers, bank accounts, decisions about Richard's tools and clothes, big decisions and small ones, all overwhelming when you're trying to process the fact that your partner of 45 years is never coming home. "Mom, I know this is hard, but you need to start figuring out what you want to do with the house," Michael said during one of those calls. His tone was businesslike, efficient. "The mortgage is paid off, right? You could probably get good money for it in this market." The house where he'd learned to ride a bicycle in the driveway, where we'd measured his height against the kitchen door frame every birthday, where he'd brought Jennifer to meet us for the first time, nervous and fidgeting with his tie. "I'm not ready to think about selling," I told him. "It's only been 2 weeks. I get that, Mom, but you can't afford to maintain a 3-bedroom house on Social Security. You need to be practical about this." Practical. That word started showing up in our conversations more and more. Michael was always encouraging me to be practical. Practical about the house, practical about my finances, practical about my future. What he never seemed to understand was that some things can't be reduced to practical decisions. Some things matter more than money or efficiency. The house was too big for just me, though. He was right about that. The heating bills were enormous, and the roof needed work, and the basement flooded every time it rained hard. 6 months after Richard died, I made the decision to sell. It broke my heart. But Michael was right about the practical considerations. I found this apartment in Queens, close to the subway, close to shops and the library. It's small, but it's affordable. And I thought maybe being closer to the city would mean seeing my family more often. Michael and Jennifer live in New Jersey now, about an hour away by car, which might as well be another planet for how often I see them. The day I moved into this apartment, Sarah helped me pack boxes. She was going through a difficult divorce from Tony then, and she seemed angry at the world, angry at men, angry at the way life had disappointed her. "I can't believe he's making you sell the house," she said, taping up a box of kitchen dishes with more force than necessary. "He's not making me do anything," I defended Michael. "He's trying to help me make good decisions." Sarah snorted. "Right. He's helping you, just like he helped when Dad was sick. Remember how often he visited then?" "Oh, wait, he didn't." Her words stung because they held too much truth. During Richard's final months, when he was in and out of hospitals, when I was driving to Mount Sinai 3 times a week for appointments and treatments, Michael visited exactly twice. Both times were brief, uncomfortable affairs where he stood awkwardly beside the hospital bed, making small talk about work while his father dozed fitfully. He has his own life, Sarah. His own responsibilities. And you don't? I didn't know how to answer that question then. I still don't. The first year in this apartment was the loneliest of my life. The walls are thin enough that I can hear my neighbors' conversations, their arguments, their television shows, but I rarely speak to anyone except Mrs. Hernandez, who lives across the hall. She's originally from Dominican Republic, been in New York for 30 years, and she has a warmth that reminds me of my own mother. "Mrs. Margaret," she always says when she sees me in the hallway. "How are you today? You look tired. Are you eating enough?" Mrs. Hernandez has 4 children and 12 grandchildren who visit her constantly. Her apartment always smells like garlic and plantains, and there's always music playing, merengue or bachata, and laughter spilling out into the hallway. Sometimes I stand by my door just listening to the sound of family, remembering what that felt like. During that first year alone, I started calling Michael more frequently, not because I needed anything, but because I was so desperately lonely. The silence in my apartment was suffocating, especially on weekends when the building emptied out and families went places together. "Hi, sweetheart," I'd say when he answered, just calling to see how everyone's doing. "We're fine, Mom. Same as last week when you called. How's David? How's little Emma?" Emma was their daughter, born 2 years after David. She's 8 now, and I've probably seen her a dozen times in her entire life. They're good, busy with school and activities. Maybe I could take them to the zoo sometime, or we could go to Central Park. "Mom, they've got soccer and piano lessons and play dates. Their schedules are pretty packed." Packed. Their schedules were packed, but apparently not packed enough to include their grandmother. I started sending gifts for birthdays and holidays. Not expensive things, because my Social Security doesn't allow for expensive, but thoughtful things. Books, art supplies, little toys I'd find on sale. I'd wrap them carefully and write long notes, trying to bridge the distance with words since I couldn't bridge it with presents. Most of the gifts were never acknowledged. No thank you calls from the kids, no photos of them enjoying the presents. Once, I asked Michael directly if David had liked the science kit I'd sent for his birthday. "Yeah, Mom, he liked it fine," Michael said in that flat tone he uses when he's only half listening. "Did he do any of the experiments?" "I don't know, probably. Listen, I'm in the middle of something here. Can I call you back?" He never called back. The few times I did visit their house in New Jersey felt stilted and awkward. Everyone was polite but distant. The children, David and Emma, were shy around me, not sure what to make of this woman who was supposedly their grandmother, but felt more like a stranger. "Say hello to Grandma Margaret," Jennifer would prompt them, and they'd mumble hello without making eye contact. I'd bring cookies I'd baked, and the kids would take one politely and then disappear upstairs to their rooms. Michael would make conversation about the weather or ask about my apartment, but I could tell he was counting the minutes until I left. "You should visit more often," I said during one of those visits, immediately regretting how desperate I sounded. "You know how crazy things get, Mom. Between work and the kids' schedules and everything, always the schedules. Always something more important than spending time with their father's widow, their children's grandmother, the woman who had sacrificed everything to give them a good start in life. Let me tell you about the phone call that changed everything, the one that happened 6 months before I won the lottery. I was having a particularly difficult day, feeling overwhelmed by the isolation and the silence. I'd gone to the doctor that morning for my annual checkup, and she'd found something concerning in my blood work. Nothing life-threatening, but something that needed monitoring, maybe medication. When you're alone and you get news like that, even minor medical news, it feels enormous. I had no one to discuss it with, no one to help me understand what the doctor had explained, no one to provide the simple comfort of presence during worry. I called Michael that evening, needing to share this burden with someone who cared about me. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked when he heard my voice. I must have sounded as scared as I felt. "I went to the doctor today, and she found something in my blood work. My cholesterol levels are quite high, and she's concerned about my blood pressure." "Okay, so what does that mean? Do you need medication?" "She wants to see me again in a month to discuss treatment options." "Michael, I'm scared. What if it's serious? What if—" "Mom, you're probably fine. These doctors, they worry about everything. Take the medication if she prescribes it and try not to stress about it. Could you maybe come with me to the next appointment? I know it's asking a lot, but I get confused sometimes when they use all those medical terms and—" "Mom, I can't take time off work for a routine doctor's appointment. You're a smart woman. You'll figure it out." That's when I heard it. In the background of our phone call, I could hear Jennifer laughing at something on television. I could hear the children playing, their voices bright and carefree. I could hear life happening, family life, the kind of life I used to have, the kind of life I desperately missed. And my son couldn't take 2 hours from that life to help his frightened, elderly mother navigate a potentially serious health concern. "Okay," I whispered into the phone. "I understand." "Mom, don't be dramatic about this. It's just high cholesterol. Half the people your age have high cholesterol." Dramatic. I was being dramatic for wanting my son's support during a health scare. After I hung up that night, I sat in my living room chair, the one good piece of furniture I'd brought from the old house, and cried harder than I'd cried since Richard's funeral. But these weren't tears of grief for someone who had died. These were tears of grief for someone who was still alive, but had apparently become invisible to her own children. That's when I started to wonder if Michael saw me as anything more than an obligation, a burden, a remnant of his past that he maintained contact with out of duty rather than love. The wondering became certainty about 3 months later, in July, on one of those brutally hot New York summer days when the humidity makes breathing feel like work. My air conditioner had broken, and at 72, sitting in a stuffy apartment during a heat wave isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. I called Michael to ask if he could recommend a repair service, maybe help me understand what a reasonable price might be for the work. I wasn't asking him to fix it himself or to pay for it. I just wanted advice from someone I trusted. "I'm at Jennifer's parents' place for the weekend," he told me. "We're out at the shore with the kids." The shore. They were at the shore, enjoying ocean breezes and family time, while I was wilting in my overheated apartment. "Could you maybe just give me the name of the company you used when your air conditioner broke last year?" I asked. "Mom, I don't remember. Just Google air conditioning repair services. You'll find someone." Google. At 72 years old, having raised a family and managed a household for 5 decades, I was supposed to Google my way out of every problem while my son enjoyed beach vacations. But here's what really broke my heart. After we hung up, I realized I could hear children laughing and playing in the background of his call. My grandchildren were there, probably building sand castles or chasing waves, creating memories with their parents and their other grandparents. When was the last time I'd been included in a family vacation? When was the last time my name had even come up when they were planning beach trips or holiday gatherings? I fixed my air conditioner problem myself, eventually. Found a kind man named Jose, who came within 2 hours, diagnosed the issue, and had it running again for a reasonable price. He was patient with my questions and even showed me how to change the filter so the unit would run more efficiently. "You take care of yourself, senora," he said as he was leaving. "It's too hot for people our age to suffer without air conditioning." A stranger, a repairman I'll probably never see again, showed more concern for my well-being than my own son had. That night, as I lay in my bed, finally cool and comfortable, I made a phone call to Sarah. She was living in Brooklyn then, working as a receptionist at a dental office and struggling to make ends meet after her divorce. We talked sometimes, though our relationship had become complicated by years of family dynamics and her own bitterness about men in general. "How are Michael and the family?" I asked during our conversation. Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Mom, you know he was here last weekend, right? He and Jennifer brought the kids to see me." My heart stopped. "No, I didn't know that. They were in the city for some event at Jennifer's work. They stayed overnight at my place because David wanted to see the Statue of Liberty. Michael had been in New York, less than an hour from my apartment, and hadn't bothered to visit, hadn't even called to let me know he was in town. Maybe they were just too busy," I said. though the words felt like ash in my mouth. Mom, they had time to go to Times Square with the kids. They had time to take them to that M&M store and to Central Park. They just didn't have time for you. The truth hit me like a punch to the stomach. Times Square is 20 minutes from my apartment by subway. Central Park is even closer. My son had spent an entire weekend 15 minutes away from me and couldn't spare an hour for a visit. After I hung up with Sarah, I did something I'd never done before. I allowed myself to feel angry. Really, truly angry. Not hurt, not disappointed, not confused, angry. I was angry at the years of sacrifice that seemed to have been forgotten. Angry at the birthday cards I sent that went unacknowledged. The phone calls that went unreturned. The invitations to visit that were always declined due to busy schedules. I was angry at being treated like an afterthought in the lives of people I had given everything to create and nurture. But mostly, I was angry at myself for accepting this treatment for so long, for making excuses for behavior that would have been unacceptable from strangers, let alone from family. That night, I wrote Michael a letter. I poured all my hurt and frustration into 3 pages of careful handwriting, explaining how invisible I felt, how much I missed being part of their lives, how desperately I wanted to be a real grandmother to David and Emma instead of just a name they heard occasionally. I never sent the letter. I read it over the next morning and realized it sounded pathetic, like the pleadings of a desperate old woman. So I folded it up and put it in my jewelry box, next to Richard's wedding ring and the silver locket my mother had given me. But writing that letter clarified something important. I had to decide whether I was going to continue accepting crumbs of attention from my children or demand the respect I deserved. The decision came 6 weeks later, during what I now think of as the phone call that broke everything open. It was a Tuesday evening in September. I'd had a good day, had lunch with Mrs. Hernandez, visited the library, taken a walk through the small park near my building. I felt lighter than I had in months, almost optimistic. Maybe that's why I decided to call Michael, to share some of that lightweight feeling with someone I loved. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, and I could tell immediately that I'd caught him at a bad time. "Yeah?" he said instead of hello. "Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom. Is this a bad time?" "Mom, what do you need?" "I'm trying to help Emma with her math homework." "What do you need?" Not, "How are you?" or "Good to hear from you." "What do you need?" As if the only reason I would call was to ask for something. "I don't need anything," I said carefully. "I just wanted to chat, see how everyone's doing." "We're fine, same as always." I could hear Emma in the background, frustrated with whatever math problem she was working on. I could hear Jennifer talking to someone, maybe on another phone. "Maybe I could help Emma with her math," I suggested. "I was pretty good at arithmetic when you were her age." "Mom, we've got it handled." Was there something else? Something else. As if wanting to talk to my son, wanting to feel connected to my granddaughter, was something that needed to be gotten through quickly, so he could return to more important matters. "No," I said quietly. "Nothing else. Tell Emma I said hello." "Will do. I gotta go." The line went dead, and I sat there holding the phone, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my entire life. That's when I heard it. Because I hadn't properly hung up my phone, the line was still connected. Michael's phone was still connected. And what I heard next changed everything between us forever. "Who was that?" Jennifer asked. "My mom," Michael replied, and I could hear the resignation in his voice. "What did she want?" "Nothing specific. She just calls sometimes to talk. I think she's lonely. She needs to get some hobbies or something," Jennifer said. "Maybe make some friends her own age." "I know. I feel bad for her, but I can't be her entertainment director. I've got my own family to worry about." Entertainment director. That's how my son described my desire to be part of his life. Entertainment director. But what came next was even worse. "Remember what Dr. Stevens said about setting boundaries with needy parents?" Jennifer continued. "You can't let her become too dependent on you emotionally. It's not healthy for anyone." Dr. Stevens. They had discussed me with a therapist. I was a problem that needed professional consultation. "I know," Michael sighed. "But she's my mom. What am I supposed to do, just cut her off?" "No one's saying cut her off. Just maybe don't answer every time she calls. Let some of them go to voicemail. She'll get the message eventually." "Let some of them go to voicemail. She'll get the message eventually." That's when I understood with crystal clarity that my son saw me as a burden, an obligation, a needy parent who required professional advice to manage. The woman who had worked 2 jobs to pay for his college education, who had sat beside his hospital bed when he was sick, who had sacrificed everything for his happiness and success, had become someone he needed to set boundaries against. I hung up the phone as quietly as I could and sat in my living room chair, shaking with humiliation and heartbreak. Have you ever had a moment when your entire understanding of your place in the world shifted? When everything you believed about your relationships, your worth, your family, suddenly revealed itself to be an illusion. That's what happened to me that September evening. In the space of one overheard conversation, I realized that I had been deluding myself for years. My children didn't miss me, didn't think about me, didn't value my presence in their lives. I was a duty, an obligation, a problem to be managed with professional strategies designed to keep needy parents at arm's length. The next morning, I called Sarah and asked her directly, "Do you and Michael talk about me?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes," she admitted. "What do you say?" Another pause. "Mom, you're going to get upset." "I'm already upset. Please just tell me the truth. We worry that I don't know, that you don't have enough going on in your own life, that you're too focused on us, too focused on them. My children thought I was too focused on my own family." "Sarah, what else am I supposed to focus on? You and Michael and your children are my family. You're what matters most to me." "I know, Mom. But maybe that's the problem." The problem. My love for my children had become a problem. That conversation lasted another 20 minutes, and by the end of it, I understood that both of my children had been discussing my neediness for months, maybe years. They had decided together that I was asking too much of them, expecting too much contact, too much involvement in their lives. Never mind that I saw Michael maybe 6 times a year. Never mind that I talked to Sarah once a week at most. Never mind that I had never asked either of them for financial help, never imposed on their schedules, never demanded anything except basic acknowledgement of my existence. Somehow, even that minimal level of attention was too much. For 3 weeks after those revelations, I didn't call either of my children. I wanted to see how long it would take before one of them reached out to me. I wanted to test whether they would notice my absence, or if they would be relieved by it. 3 weeks. 21 days passed without a single phone call from either Michael or Sarah. No one checked on me. No one wondered if I was sick or hurt or sad. The silence was absolute. On day 22, Sarah called. "Mom, are you okay? We haven't heard from you." We. As if they had been discussing my unusual quietness. As if my absence had registered as something worthy of attention. "I'm fine," I told her. "Just giving you both some space, like you wanted." "Mom, I never said I wanted space." Not directly, but I got the message. We talked for a few more minutes, but the conversation felt forced, artificial. Sarah was calling out of obligation, not because she missed me or genuinely wanted to know how I was doing. I could hear it in her voice. The same resigned duty I'd heard in Michael's voice during that overheard conversation. After we hung up, I realized something profound. I would rather be completely alone than be someone else's burden. I would rather have no family than have a family who saw me as a problem to be managed. That's when I started pulling back. Not dramatically, not with announcements or ultimatums, but gradually, quietly. I stopped initiating calls. I stopped sending unsolicited gifts. I stopped suggesting visits or activities that involved my grandchildren. Instead, I focused on building a life that didn't revolve around waiting for crumbs of attention from people who clearly didn't want to give them. I started spending more time with Mrs. Hernandez, who invited me for coffee often and genuinely seemed to enjoy my company. I joined a book club at the library. I started taking the subway into Manhattan once a week, just to walk around different neighborhoods and remember what it felt like to be part of the larger world. Slowly, very slowly, I began to rebuild my sense of self-worth. I started remembering who I had been before I became defined entirely by my roles as wife and mother. I remembered that I liked mystery novels and art museums and the way Central Park looks in different seasons. I started remembering that I was a complete person, not just half of someone else's life. The lottery ticket came into my life during this period of rediscovery. I had started buying one scratch-off ticket every Saturday as a small act of hope, a $5 investment in possibility. Most weeks I won nothing. Occasionally I'd win $5 or $10. It wasn't about the money, really. It was about believing that sometimes, unexpectedly, life can surprise you. The ticket I scratched that October morning was different. As I revealed number after matching number, I felt my hands start to shake. $500,000. $500,000. More money than I'd ever seen, more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. My first instinct was to call Michael. After all, this was huge news, life-changing news. This was the kind of thing families celebrate together. But as I reached for the phone, I stopped. Why was I calling him? So he could be happy for me? So we could plan together how to use this windfall? Or was I calling because I thought maybe, finally, I had something that would make me interesting to him again? That last thought stopped me cold. Did I really believe that money would restore my value in my son's eyes? Was I so desperate for his attention that I would use a lottery win to purchase it? Instead of calling immediately, I sat with the ticket for 3 hours, thinking about what this money meant and what I wanted to do with it. For the first time in years, I had power, real power, financial independence, the ability to make choices based on what I wanted rather than what I could afford. I could travel. I could move to a better apartment. I could help people I cared about, if they cared about me in return, or I could keep this secret and see what happened. I could discover whether my children's treatment of me would change if they thought I might have something to offer them beyond my inconvenient love. That's when I decided to conduct an experiment. I would not tell my family about the lottery win. Instead, I would continue to live exactly as I had been living, in my small apartment on my fixed income, and see how they treated me when they believed I had nothing to offer except myself. The ticket sat on my kitchen table for the rest of that day while I considered the implications of my decision. By evening, I had made up my mind. I would claim the money privately, invest it wisely, but not tell my children about my changed circumstances. This wasn't about revenge exactly, though I admit there was some satisfaction in the idea of keeping such significant news from people who had made it clear they didn't want to be bothered with my life. It was more about clarity. I wanted to see the truth of my relationships without the complications that money might introduce. The next morning, I took the subway to the lottery office in Lower Manhattan to claim my prize. The process was more complicated than I'd expected. Forms to fill out, choices to make about how to receive the money, tax implications to consider. Congratulations, the lottery official said as he handed me a check for the lump sum amount after taxes. This must be exciting for you. Yes, I said, looking down at the check. $312,000 after taxes. Still an enormous sum for someone who had been living on $1,800 a month from Social Security. Do you have plans for the money? He asked conversationally. I'm still figuring that out, I told him, which was the truth. Walking out of that building and back into the bustle of downtown Manhattan, I felt different than I had ever felt before. Not just because of the money, though, that was certainly part of it. I felt powerful. I felt free. I felt like I had choices. For the first time in years, I wasn't at the mercy of other people's decisions about my worth or my place in their lives. I opened a new savings account at a different bank, not the one where my family might expect me to do business. I met with a financial advisor who helped me understand investment options that would provide additional monthly income while preserving the principal. I was careful, conservative, smart about the money. Within 2 weeks, I had transformed my financial situation completely while maintaining the appearance of my previous circumstances. I still lived in the same apartment, still shopped for groceries with coupons, still presented myself to the world as a retiree living modestly on Social Security. But now I had options. I had security. I had the power to make this choice or that choice based on my own preferences rather than my limitations. The first test came about a month after I'd claimed the lottery prize. Sarah called, sounding stressed and overwhelmed. "Mom, I hate to ask this, but could you lend me $500? She said. "My car needs repairs and I don't get paid until next week. I know you're on a fixed income, but I'm really desperate." $500. A month earlier, that would have been a significant portion of my monthly budget. Money I would have had to scrape together by skipping meals or postponing other necessities. Now it was pocket change. But this was exactly the kind of situation I had been waiting for. How would Sarah ask me for money if she knew I was wealthy? Would she ask for $500 or $5,000? Would she see me differently if she knew I could solve her problems without sacrifice? "Sarah, I'm sorry, but I just can't right now," I said. Things are tight for me, too. The lie felt strange in my mouth, but I needed to know how she would respond when she thought I couldn't help her. "I understand, Mom. I just thought maybe—" "Never mind. It's fine." Her disappointment was obvious, but what struck me was that she didn't try to convince me, didn't explain how important the repair was, didn't ask if there was any way I could manage even a smaller amount. She accepted my refusal quickly and moved on to other topics. If I had been truly struggling financially, if $500 truly represented a major sacrifice for me, Sarah would have accepted that her mother couldn't help her and would have found another solution. She wasn't trying to manipulate me or pressure me. She was respecting my limitations. That gave me hope that maybe our relationship was healthier than I had thought. The test with Michael was different and more revealing. 2 weeks after Sarah's request, Michael called with what he presented as a crisis. "Mom, I need your help with something," he said, which was unusual because he never asked me for help with anything. "What's wrong?" "Emma needs to have her tonsils removed and our insurance isn't going to cover the full cost. We're looking at about $3,000 out of pocket." $3,000. A serious amount of money for most families, including mine before the lottery win. "That's a lot of money, Michael. What are you going to do?" "Well, Jennifer's parents are going to help some, but we're still short about $1,500. I was wondering if maybe you could help with some of that." $1,500. He was asking his mother, whom he believed to be living on Social Security, to contribute $1,500 to his financial emergency. Michael, you know I'm living on a fixed income. Even if I wanted to help, I don't have that kind of money. I know it's a lot, Mom, but Emma really needs this surgery. The doctor says her tonsils are causing sleep problems and affecting her concentration at school. Now he was appealing to my grandmother instincts, making this about Emma's well-being rather than his financial planning. Can't you get a loan from the bank? Our credit isn't great right now, and the interest rates are pretty high. I was hoping maybe family could help instead of us having to go to strangers. Family. Now I was family again. When he needed money. Michael, I would love to help Emma, but I honestly don't have $1,500 to spare. I'm barely making ends meet as it is. What about your savings? Don't you have anything put aside for emergencies? My savings. He wanted me to deplete whatever small safety net I might have accumulated over the years to solve his financial problem. I have a tiny emergency fund, but I can't touch that. What if I get sick? What if my apartment needs major repairs? I need to keep what little I have. Mom, this is about your granddaughter's health. Surely that's more important than keeping money in the bank? There it was. The manipulation I had been expecting. The guilt designed to make me feel selfish for prioritizing my financial security over his convenience. Michael, Emma is going to get her surgery one way or another, right? You'll figure it out, you always do. I can't believe you're saying no to this. We're talking about your granddaughter. I'm not saying no to Emma's surgery. I'm saying I can't contribute $1,500 because I don't have $1,500 to contribute. Fine, he said, and I could hear the anger in his voice. I guess I understand where I stand with you, where he stood with me. As if my inability to produce large sums of money on demand reflected my feelings about him as a person. Michael, this isn't about how I feel about you or Emma. This is about financial reality. Right, financial reality. I get it. He hung up without saying goodbye. That conversation taught me something important about my son's relationship with money, and more specifically, with my money. He didn't just think I should help if I could. He thought I should help even if it caused me hardship. He thought his needs, his family's needs, should take priority over my financial security. A week later, Sarah called to tell me that Emma's surgery had been scheduled and that Michael had found the money somewhere else. He's pretty upset with you, she said carefully. Why? He thinks you could have helped more than you did. Sarah, what exactly did he tell you I should have done? He said you refused to help with Emma's medical expenses. Refused. Not couldn't afford to help, but refused to help. Michael had reframed my financial limitations as a moral choice, making me the villain in his story. Did he tell you how much money he asked me for? Sarah was quiet for a moment. He said he asked if you could contribute something. Something. Not $1,500. Something. He asked me for $1,500, Sarah. $1,500. How much do you think I have in savings? I don't know, Mom. I never really thought about it. I live on $1,800 a month from Social Security. After rent and utilities and groceries and medications, I might have $100 left over on a good month. How long do you think it would take me to save $1,500? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I didn't realize he asked for so much. And he didn't just ask. He pressured me. He made it sound like I was choosing money over Emma's health, like I was being selfish and cold. Mom, I'm sure he didn't mean it that way. What way did he mean it then? Another long pause. Maybe he was just stressed about Emma being sick. Maybe he was just stressed. Always an excuse for Michael. Always a reason why his behavior was understandable, forgivable, justified. Sarah, let me ask you something. If you needed $1,500 for a medical emergency and I told you I didn't have it, would you be angry with me? No, of course not. Would you think I was being selfish or uncaring? No, Mom. I'd understand that you don't have that kind of money. Then why is it acceptable for Michael to be angry with me for the same thing? Sarah didn't have an answer for that question. Over the next few months, I noticed changes in how both of my children treated me. Changes that seemed directly related to my perceived refusal to help with Emma's surgery. Phone calls became even less frequent. When we did talk, conversations were shorter and more formal. Michael, in particular, seemed to have written me off as someone who had revealed her true priorities. He was polite but distant, like I was an acquaintance rather than his mother. The irony, of course, was that I could have solved his financial problem with a single check. I could have paid for Emma's entire surgery, plus her follow-up care, plus any other medical expenses the family might face for years to come. But he would never know that because he had decided I was the kind of person who would choose money over family. His assumption about my character hurt more than his request for money had. He believed, based on one conversation about finances, that I was selfish, that I valued my small savings more than my granddaughter's well-being. He had so little faith in who I was as a person that he could rewrite our entire relationship based on what he perceived as a moral failure on my part. By Christmas, the distance between us was obvious to everyone. Emma's surgery had gone well, and she was healthy and thriving, but Michael's resentment toward me had not faded. At Sarah's apartment for Christmas dinner, he was cordial but cold, speaking to me only when directly addressed. "How's your apartment, Mom?" he asked during dinner, the kind of question someone asks when they're fulfilling social obligations. "It's fine," I answered. "Small but comfortable." "Good," he said, and turned his attention back to his plate. That was the extent of our Christmas conversation. My son, the boy I had raised and sacrificed for, had reduced me to the status of a distant relative who merited basic politeness and nothing more. Emma and David were polite, but seemed confused by the tension they could obviously feel between their father and me. At one point, Emma came over to where I was sitting and showed me a drawing she had made at school. "It's our family," she said, pointing to stick figures arranged around a house. "That's Mommy and Daddy and David and me. It's beautiful," I told her. "You're very talented. Do you want me to draw you too?" she asked. Before I could answer, Michael appeared beside us. "Emma, come help Mommy in the kitchen," he said, guiding her away from me. I wasn't included in her family drawing, and Michael made sure I understood that the exclusion was intentional. Sitting in Sarah's living room that Christmas day, watching my son interact warmly with everyone except me, I felt a clarity I had never experienced before. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about financial limitations or competing priorities. This was about respect. Michael didn't respect me enough to accept my limitations without resentment. He didn't respect me enough to believe that my inability to help was genuine rather than selfish. He didn't respect me enough to forgive what he perceived as a moral failing. Most importantly, he didn't respect me enough to love me unconditionally, the way I had always loved him. That night, after returning to my apartment, I made a decision. If Michael couldn't love me when he thought I had nothing to offer, then he didn't deserve to know about the something I actually had. I would continue my experiment indefinitely. I would continue to live modestly, to present myself as a woman of limited means, and see if my children's treatment of me would ever improve, based solely on who I was, rather than what I could provide. The months that followed were both liberating and lonely. Liberating because I was no longer trying to earn love and attention through sacrifice and accommodation. Lonely because the distance between my children and me continued to grow. I used my lottery winnings to improve my life in ways they would never notice. I hired a cleaning service to come bi-weekly, a luxury that made my small apartment feel more manageable. I bought higher quality groceries, clothes that fit well, and made me feel confident. Small luxuries that improved my daily experience without drawing attention. Most importantly, I started traveling. Day trips at first, then weekend getaways, then longer journeys to places I had always wanted to see. I visited art museums in Philadelphia, took a train to Boston to see the fall foliage, spent a week in Charleston admiring the historic architecture and eating magnificent food. For the first time in my adult life, I was living for my own pleasure and curiosity, rather than for other people's needs and expectations. Mrs. Hernandez noticed the changes in me before anyone else did. "Mrs. Margaret, you look different," she said one day when we met in the hallway. "Younger. Happier." "I feel different," I told her, which was the truth. "It's good to see," she said, smiling. "You deserve to be happy." Those words, "you deserve to be happy," hit me with surprising force. When was the last time someone had told me I deserved happiness? When was the last time I had believed it myself? My relationship with Mrs. Hernandez deepened during this period. She invited me for coffee regularly, and I began to understand what friendship felt like when it was based on mutual enjoyment rather than obligation or need. She liked my company. I liked hers. Neither of us wanted anything from the other except conversation and companionship. "Tell me about your children," she said one day as we sat in her kitchen, the smell of garlic and cilantro from her cooking filling the air. "What do you want to know? Are they good to you?" It was such a direct question, the kind most people avoid asking because they don't want to hear the answer if it's painful. "They're busy with their own lives," I said, which was my standard diplomatic response. Mrs. Hernandez looked at me steadily. "That's not what I asked." I was quiet for a long moment, considering how to answer honestly. "No," I finally said. "They're not good to me. They don't mean to be unkind, but they don't make room for me in their lives. They see me as an obligation rather than a person they enjoy spending time with. That must be very painful." "It is." "Have you talked to them about how you feel?" "Not directly. I've tried to hint, to suggest that I'd like to see them more often, but they always have reasons why they can't. Busy schedules, work commitments. Their children's activities? Mrs. Hernandez nodded thoughtfully. My children are busy too. They work. They have their own families, their own problems. But they make time for me because they know I won't be here forever. Won't be here forever. That phrase stayed with me for days after our conversation. I started wondering if my children had simply never considered the fact that I wouldn't be here forever. Maybe they assumed that I would always be available whenever they decided they had time for me, that there would always be another opportunity to be better sons and daughters. Maybe they needed a reminder that time isn't infinite, that relationships require maintenance, that people can disappear from your life if you don't value them while they're present. That's when I decided to take my experiment one step further. I had been living quietly on my lottery winnings for almost 8 months, making small improvements to my life while maintaining the appearance of financial limitation. My children's treatment of me had not improved. If anything, Michael seemed to have settled into a pattern of minimal obligatory contact, while Sarah remained friendly but distant. It was time to see what would happen if they thought they were losing me entirely. I didn't plan anything dramatic or manipulative. I simply decided to mirror their energy back to them. If they called once a month, I would call once a month. If they visited twice a year, I would expect to be visited twice a year. If they remembered my birthday, I would remember theirs. If they forgot, I would forget too. Most importantly, I would stop being available whenever they decided they needed something from me. The first test came in late summer when Sarah called asking if I could babysit her neighbor's children for a weekend while the neighbor was out of town. She'll pay you, Sarah said, and I know you could use the extra money. In the past, I would have said yes immediately, grateful for any opportunity to be useful, to be needed. But this request bothered me for several reasons. Sarah hadn't asked how I was doing, hadn't inquired about my health or my life. She had called specifically because she needed something from me. More importantly, she was asking me to take care of someone else's children when I rarely got to spend time with my own grandchildren. Sarah, I can't that weekend, I said. Why not? Do you have plans? Plans. She seemed genuinely surprised that I might have plans, as if my social calendar was expected to be empty and available for her convenience. Yes, I have plans. What kind of plans? The question annoyed me. Since when did I need to justify my schedule to my daughter? I'm going out of town for a few days. Out of town? Where? I'm visiting a friend in Connecticut. This was true, though the friend was someone I had met through online forums for widowed women, someone Sarah had never heard of. Since when do you have friends in Connecticut? Since I started building a life that didn't revolve around waiting for you to need me, I thought, but didn't say. Since recently, I said instead. Sarah seemed genuinely puzzled by this conversation. Mom, are you okay? You seem different lately. Different. Yes, I was different. I was no longer available on demand for other people's convenience. I'm fine, Sarah. I'm just busy these days. Busy with what? With living, I wanted to say. With traveling and reading and making new friends and discovering who I am when I'm not defined entirely by my relationships to other people. Just busy, I said. After we hung up, I realized that Sarah had never considered the possibility that I might have my own life, my own interests, my own schedule that didn't revolve around her needs, and Michael's needs and their children's needs. The realization was both sad and liberating. Over the next few months, I continued to pull back from my old patterns of availability and accommodation. When Michael called during dinner asking for advice about Emma's school problems, I told him I'd call him back the next day instead of dropping everything to discuss it immediately. When Sarah wanted me to drive to Brooklyn to help her move furniture, I told her I wasn't available that weekend. Each time I said no to something, I could hear surprise in their voices. They had become accustomed to my immediate availability, my willingness to rearrange my schedule for their convenience. My new boundaries confused them. The changes became more obvious during the holidays. Instead of spending the entire day at family gatherings, cooking and cleaning and catering to everyone else's needs, I arrived after dinner and left before the cleanup. Instead of bringing elaborate homemade contributions, I bought desserts from the bakery. Mom, you seem tired, Sarah commented during Thanksgiving. Are you feeling okay? I feel fine, I said. I'm just not doing as much cooking and preparation as I used to. But you love cooking for family occasions. Did I? Or had I simply been expected to cook for family occasions for so many years that everyone assumed I enjoyed it? I'm 72 years old, Sarah. Maybe it's time for someone else to do the cooking. Michael looked up from his conversation with David. Mom, if you need help with expenses, you could have said something. We could have brought more food. Expenses. He assumed my reduced contribution was about money rather than choice. It's not about expenses, I said calmly. It's about energy. I'm getting older, and I want to enjoy family gatherings instead of spending the entire day in the kitchen. The room was quiet for a moment. as if no one had ever considered that I might want to enjoy family gatherings rather than work through them. "Well, next year we'll plan better," Jennifer said diplomatically. "Maybe we can all bring something so you don't have to do everything. Next year we'll plan better." As if my lifetime of holiday cooking had been the result of poor planning rather than expectation and habit. That Thanksgiving was the first time I spent more time talking to my grandchildren than I spent working in the kitchen. Emma showed me her art projects from school, and David told me about his interest in astronomy. They were interesting, intelligent children, and I realized I had missed years of real conversation with them because I had been too busy fulfilling everyone else's expectations about what grandmothers were supposed to do. As Christmas approached, I made another decision that surprised my family. Instead of hosting Christmas Eve dinner as I had for the past 15 years, I told them I was going to spend the holiday with Mrs. Hernandez and her family. "You're not coming to Christmas?" Sarah asked, clearly shocked. "I'm spending Christmas Eve with friends. You're all welcome to visit me on Christmas afternoon if you'd like." "Mom, we always spend Christmas Eve together. It's tradition. Tradition." As if traditions couldn't evolve. As if my role in family traditions couldn't change as I got older and my circumstances changed. The tradition was that I cooked dinner for everyone at my house. Since I don't have a house anymore, and since I don't want to do all that cooking anymore, maybe we need new traditions. Michael joined the conversation. "We could have dinner at our place instead." "That would be nice," I said. "But I've already made plans for Christmas Eve. Can't you change your plans?" "Can't you change your plans?" The assumption that my plans were less important than their convenience, that my relationships were less valuable than their family time. "I could change my plans," I said carefully, "but I don't want to. I'm looking forward to spending Christmas Eve with Mrs. Hernandez and her family." The silence that followed was heavy with confusion, and, I suspected, some resentment. "Fine," Michael said finally. "Christmas afternoon, then." Christmas Eve with Mrs. Hernandez was a revelation. Her apartment was crowded with children and grandchildren and cousins and neighbors, everyone talking and laughing and eating and sharing stories. The noise was constant and joyful, the kind of noise I remembered from holidays when my children were young and still lived at home. But what struck me most was how naturally I was included in everything. No one questioned my presence or treated me like an outsider. Mrs. Hernandez introduced me to everyone as my dear friend Margaret, and her grandchildren called me Abuela Margaret and asked me to help them with a puzzle. I was useful without being used. I was appreciated without being taken for granted. I was part of a family celebration without being expected to sacrifice my own enjoyment for everyone else's. Christmas afternoon at Sarah's apartment was different. Polite but strained, as if everyone was trying to recalibrate their expectations about my role in family gatherings. I brought cookies from a bakery instead of homemade desserts, and I noticed Jennifer's slight frown when she saw the store packaging. "These look delicious," she said with forced enthusiasm. The children were happy to see me, but they seemed uncertain about how to interact with this version of their grandmother who wasn't bustling around serving food and cleaning up after everyone. Emma approached me hesitantly and asked if I wanted to see her new book. "I'd love to," I told her, and we sat together on Sarah's couch while she read to me. It was the longest uninterrupted conversation I'd had with Emma in years, and I realized how much I had missed by being too busy catering to everyone else to focus on the grandchildren I supposedly loved so much. "Grandma, why didn't you cook dinner this year?" Emma asked during a pause in her reading. "Because I wanted to spend Christmas visiting friends instead of working in the kitchen," I told her honestly. "Did you have fun with your friends?" "I did. We played games and sang songs and told stories. It was very nice." Emma considered this. "Maybe next year I could come with you?" "Maybe you could," I said, and I meant it. Michael overheard this exchange and interrupted. "Emma, Grandma probably wants to spend time with her own friends, not take care of children." "Take care of children," as if spending time with my granddaughter would be work rather than pleasure. "Actually," I said, "I'd love to have Emma visit Mrs. Hernandez with me sometime. She has great grandchildren Emma's age, and they're always looking for new friends." "We'll see," Michael said in that tone parents use when they mean absolutely not, but don't want to argue in front of children. That exchange crystallized something for me. Michael didn't want me to have my own life, my own friends, my own interests. He wanted me to be available for his family, when convenient, but not so independent that I might offer his children alternatives to the family structure he controlled. He wanted me to be a grandmother on his terms, available when needed, but invisible when not needed. Grateful for whatever attention he chose to give me, but not engaged enough with the world to have my own opinions about our relationship. For the first time, I saw clearly that Michael's issues with me had nothing to do with money or neediness or boundaries. They had to do with control. He wanted to control the terms of our relationship, and my growing independence threatened that control. That insight changed everything for me. The final confrontation didn't happen the way I had imagined it would. There was no dramatic moment, no heated argument, no tearful showdown in a restaurant or family gathering. Instead, it happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning in February when Michael called me with what he clearly thought was good news. "Mom, I have something to tell you," he said, and his voice had more warmth in it than I'd heard in months. "What's that?" "Jennifer got a promotion at work, a big one. They're making her a regional manager, and it comes with a significant salary increase." "That's wonderful news," I said, and I meant it. Jennifer had always worked hard, and I was genuinely happy for their good fortune. "Here's the thing," Michael continued. "With Jennifer's new salary, we're going to be in a much better financial position. We're thinking about buying a bigger house, maybe something with a guest room." A guest room. I could hear the implication in his voice. "That sounds nice. The thing is, Mom, we realize we haven't been as attentive to you as we should have been. We've both been so stressed about money and work and the kids' schedules, and I know that's affected our relationship. Such a careful, diplomatic way to describe years of neglect and dismissal. I appreciate you saying that, Michael. So we were thinking, once we get settled in the new house, maybe you could come visit more often. Maybe even stay for longer visits, like a week or two at a time. The kids would love to have more time with their grandmother. Now that they had more money, now that Jennifer's promotion had eliminated their financial stress, suddenly they were ready to make room for me in their lives. "That's a generous offer," I said carefully. "It's not generous, Mom. It's what we should have been doing all along. We want to do better, but only now, when doing better wouldn't require any sacrifice from them, when their improved financial situation made hospitality easy rather than burdensome." "Michael, can I ask you something?" "Sure. If Jennifer hadn't gotten this promotion, if your financial situation hadn't changed, would you still be wanting to do better?" There was a long pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean, is your desire to improve our relationship connected to your improved financial circumstances? Are you able to be a better son now because it's more convenient for you?" "Mom, it's not about convenience. It's about having the resources to be more hospitable. As if love and attention were commodities that required financial resources rather than choices that required emotional commitment. Michael, spending time with me has never required financial resources. It never required a guest room or a bigger house or a higher salary. It required making me a priority, and that's something money can't buy. I know that. I'm not saying it's about money. I'm saying that being less stressed about money makes it easier for us to focus on other things, like family relationships. Easier. Being a good son had always been possible for Michael. It had just been inconvenient when he was worried about his own financial security. So when things were harder for you financially, maintaining a relationship with me was too much to handle along with everything else. Mom, you're twisting what I'm saying. I don't think I am. I think you're telling me that you can afford to be a good son now, but you couldn't afford it before. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Another long pause. I meant that we want to do better going forward. Isn't that what matters? Going forward. As if the years of dismissal and neglect were water under the bridge, as if good intentions for the future erased the harm of the past. Michael, let me tell you what I heard in what you just said. I heard that when you thought I might need something from you, time, attention, emotional support, you couldn't afford to give it. But now that you're financially comfortable, you're ready to be generous with your time and attention. Do you understand how that makes me feel? Mom, it makes me feel like a charity case. Like you're offering to help the poor, unfortunate woman who raised you, now that helping won't cost you anything. That's not how I see you. Then how do you see me? He was quiet for a long moment. I see you as my mother, someone I love but haven't been good at showing it. Why haven't you been good at showing it? Because life got complicated. Work and money and raising kids. It's all so overwhelming sometimes. Michael, do you think my life hasn't been complicated? Do you think raising you and Sarah was simple and easy? Do you think losing your father was uncomplicated? No, of course not. But I never stopped showing you that I loved you, even when life was complicated and overwhelming. Even when I was working 2 jobs and worried about money and dealing with your father's illness and death. I never stopped calling you, never stopped wanting to spend time with you, never stopped making you a priority. I know you didn't. So what's the difference between us? What made it possible for me to maintain our relationship through difficult times, but impossible for you to do the same? He didn't have an answer for that question, and his silence told me everything I needed to know about how he viewed our relationship. I was the parent. He was the child. It was my job to maintain our connection regardless of circumstances, and his job to receive my love and attention when convenient. The idea that he might have responsibilities toward me, that he might need to make sacrifices for our relationship the way I had always made sacrifices, had simply never occurred to him. "Michael," I said gently, "I need you to understand something. Your offer to do better, to include me more in your family life, to make room for me in your new house. It's too late." "What do you mean, too late?" "I mean, I spent years waiting for you to make room for me in your life, and you made it clear that you didn't have room. Now that you have room, I don't need it anymore." "Mom, that doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense. I've built a life that doesn't depend on your attention or approval. I have friends, I have activities, I have interests. I'm not sitting around waiting for you to decide you have time for me." "Are you saying you don't want a better relationship with us?" "I'm saying the relationship we have now is the relationship you chose. You chose to be busy when I needed you. You chose to prioritize other things when I wanted to spend time with you. You chose to see me as needy and demanding when I was just lonely and looking for connection. Those were your choices, and they have consequences. But people change, Mom. Circumstances change. Can't we try to rebuild?" Rebuild. As if our relationship was a house that had been damaged by weather, rather than a connection that had been damaged by his choices. "Michael, here's what I think would happen if I said yes to your offer. I think you'd be a generous host for a few visits. You'd make me comfortable in your guest room, include me in some family activities, let the children spend time with me, and then, gradually, you'd start to find my presence inconvenient again. You'd start to resent having to plan around my visits, having to include me in family decisions, having to consider my feelings when making social plans. That's not true. It's exactly what happened before. The only difference is that this time you'd have the power to send me back to my apartment when my presence became burdensome, rather than having to ignore my phone calls and decline my invitations. Mom, I promised that wouldn't happen. You promised you'd call me back after Emma's surgery, too. You promised you'd visit more often after Dad died. You've made a lot of promises over the years that you haven't kept." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, but it was clear that we were speaking different languages. Michael saw his offer as generous and his past behavior as understandable given his circumstances. I saw his offer as insulting and his past behavior as a choice to prioritize his convenience over my well-being. We hung up with nothing resolved, and I knew that something fundamental had shifted between us. For the first time in our relationship, I had refused his attempt to control the terms of our interaction. I had said no to his solution, no to his timeline, no to his definition of what our relationship should look like going forward. It felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. 2 weeks after that phone call, Sarah called to tell me that Michael was planning to come to New York to see me. "He's really upset about your conversation," she said. "He thinks you're being unfair." "Unfair to whom?" "To him. To the family. He's trying to make things better, and you're rejecting his efforts." "Sarah, do you know what he offered me?" "He said he wants to include you more in family activities. He offered to let me visit his new house, the one he's buying with Jennifer's promotion money. He offered to let me stay in their guest room when it's convenient for them to have me." "That sounds nice." "Does it? Do you know what would have been nice? Phone calls when I was grieving your father, visits when I was adjusting to this apartment, including me in family plans instead of making me beg for invitations, showing up for my birthday, checking on me when I was sick, treating me like a person whose feelings mattered." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Mom, are you saying you don't want us in your life anymore?" "I'm saying I don't want the version of family relationship that Michael is offering. I don't want to be a guest in my son's house, invited when convenient and dismissed when not convenient. I don't want to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention he chooses to give me." "Then what do you want?" "I want to be treated with respect. I want my time to be valued the way I value yours. I want my feelings to matter, not just when it's easy to care about them, but also when it's inconvenient. I want to be a priority sometimes, not just an afterthought." "That's a lot to ask." "Is it? Is it really?" Sarah didn't answer, and I realized that both of my children saw love as something that flowed in one direction, from parent to child, with no expectation that it would be returned in kind. Michael did come to New York 3 weeks later, but not to see me. Sarah told me later that he had come to talk to her about the situation with Mom, as if I was a problem they needed to solve together. They apparently decided that I was going through some kind of phase, possibly related to grief or aging or depression, and that the best strategy was to give me space until I came to my senses, and accepted Michael's generous offer to be more involved with his family. Give me space. After years of giving me nothing but space, they had decided that more space was the solution to our problems. I learned about their strategy from Mrs. Hernandez, who had run into Sarah at the grocery store and been told in confidence that the family was worried about Margaret's state of mind. "She thinks you're depressed," Mrs. Hernandez told me over coffee. "She thinks you need professional help." Professional help? Because choosing to have standards for how I'm treated was obviously a sign of mental illness. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her you seem happier than you've been in years. I told her you're traveling and making friends and enjoying your life. I told her that if you're depressed, it's the most energetic depression I've ever seen." Mrs. Hernandez paused to sip her coffee. "She seemed surprised to hear that you have friends and activities. She said she didn't know you were involved in anything." Didn't know I was involved in anything. After months of pulling back from my old patterns of availability, after months of being busy when they called, after months of having my own plans and my own life, Sarah still thought of me as someone who sat at home waiting for family members to need me. Did she ask what kinds of things I'm involved in? She asked, but I told her that wasn't my story to tell. I said if she wanted to know about your life, she should ask you herself. It was May when Michael made his final attempt to restore our relationship on his terms. He called on a Sunday evening, which used to be our regular talking time years ago when he still made regular calls. "Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation in February, and I want to try again." "Okay. I think I understand better now what you were saying about feeling like our relationship was one-sided, and you're right. You've always been there for us, and we haven't always been there for you." This was progress, I thought. At least he was acknowledging the imbalance. I appreciate you saying that. "So here's what I want to propose. What if we started over? What if we forgot about all the mistakes in the past and just focused on building a better relationship going forward? Forgot about all the mistakes. Just like that, years of neglect would be erased from history. Michael, you can't just forget the past. The past is what brought us to this point, but dwelling on the past isn't going to help us move forward. I'm not dwelling on the past. I'm learning from it. I'm using it to make better decisions about my future." "What kinds of decisions?" "Decisions about how I spend my time, how I invest my emotional energy, what kinds of relationships I'm willing to accept." "And you've decided you're not willing to accept a relationship with me?" "I've decided I'm not willing to accept the kind of relationship you've offered me. If you want a different kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect and consistent care, I'm open to that. But it has to be real, Michael. It can't be a temporary effort that disappears as soon as your life gets busy again. How would I prove to you that it's real?" Finally, the right question. Not how to convince me to accept his terms, but how to meet my standards for what our relationship should look like. "You could start by acknowledging that the way you've treated me for the past several years has been hurtful and unacceptable. Not just saying you haven't been perfect, but really acknowledging the impact of your choices on me." I thought I already did that. "You acknowledge that you haven't been as attentive as you should have been. That's not the same thing as acknowledging that you've been hurtful." "Okay, I acknowledge that I've been hurtful. I'm sorry for that. What specifically were you hurtful about?" There was a long pause. "Mom, do we have to go through every single thing? Can't I just apologize generally and commit to doing better?" "Michael, if you don't understand specifically what you did wrong, how can you avoid doing it again? If you don't understand how your behavior affected me, how can you make sure not to repeat it?" Another pause. "Fine. Tell me what I did wrong. Tell me what I did wrong." As if this was a test he could pass by memorizing the right answers, rather than a conversation that required genuine understanding and remorse. That's not how this works. I can't give you a list of your mistakes for you to apologize for. You need to understand on your own what you did and why it was wrong. "Mom, I'm trying here. I'm really trying, but you're making this impossible." "I'm making it impossible by asking you to understand how your behavior affected me?" "You're making it impossible by setting standards that no one could meet. You want me to read your mind, to know exactly what you need without you telling me, to apologize for things I don't even remember doing. I want you to care enough about me to think about how your actions might have made me feel. I want you to care enough to remember the times you disappointed me, the promises you didn't keep, the ways you prioritized everything in your life above your relationship with me." "Mom, that's not fair. I have a wife and children and a career. I can't make you my first priority all the time. I never asked to be your first priority all the time. I asked to be a priority sometimes. I asked to matter enough that you'd call me back when you said you would, visit when you promised to visit, include me in family plans occasionally. We did include you in family plans. When? Christmas? Thanksgiving? Birthday parties? Michael, being invited to family gatherings that happen once or twice a year isn't the same thing as being included in family life. When was the last time you invited me to one of David's baseball games? When was the last time you asked if I wanted to go to dinner with you and Jennifer? When was the last time you called me just because you missed me and wanted to talk? He couldn't answer any of those questions, and we both knew it. Look, he said finally, I can see that we have different expectations about what our relationship should look like. Maybe we need to agree to disagree and just do the best we can. Agree to disagree. The last refuge of people who want to end uncomfortable conversations without changing their behavior. Michael, this isn't a matter of opinion. This is about how you treat people you claim to love. Either you're willing to make an effort to have a real relationship with me, or you're not. Either you're willing to examine your behavior and make changes, or you're not. But I'm done pretending that neglect is the same thing as love just because we're related. Mom, you're being dramatic again. Dramatic. There it was again. The word he used whenever I expressed feelings he didn't want to deal with. I'm being honest. Maybe you're not used to that from me. Fine. If that's how you want to be, fine. I tried to make things right and you don't want that. I can live with that. Good, I said. I can live with it too. And I hung up. That conversation happened 8 months ago. Michael hasn't called since, and I haven't called him. Sarah still calls occasionally, but our conversations are careful and surface level, as if she's afraid of saying something that might upset me or make me dramatic. The silence from my son should hurt more than it does. For years, I would have been devastated by the prospect of losing contact with Michael, would have done anything to restore our relationship, would have accepted any terms he offered just to have him in my life. But now, sitting in my small apartment with my lottery winnings safely invested and my independence secure, I feel something I never expected. Relief. Relief that I no longer have to perform gratitude for minimal attention. Relief that I no longer have to make excuses for being treated poorly. Relief that I no longer have to pretend that obligation is the same thing as love. I miss my son. I miss the boy he used to be, the young man who called every Sunday, the new father who was so proud to show me his children. But I don't miss the man he became, the one who saw me as a burden, who treated my love as a problem to be managed, who offered me charity when he thought I had nothing to give in return. The money I won in the lottery gave me something more valuable than financial security. It gave me the power to choose. The power to say no to relationships that diminish me, the power to build a life that doesn't depend on other people's approval, the power to love myself enough to demand better treatment from the people who claim to love me. Last month, I decided to take a trip to California. I'd never been to the West Coast, and at 72, I figured it was time to see what I'd been missing. I spent 10 days in San Francisco, walking through Golden Gate Park, riding cable cars, visiting museums, eating magnificent food. On my last day there, I was sitting in a cafe near Fisherman's Wharf when my phone rang. Emma's name appeared on the screen. My granddaughter, now 9 years old, calling me directly for the first time in her life. "Grandma Margaret," she said when I answered. "Hi, sweetheart. What a nice surprise. Daddy told me I could call you. I wanted to ask you something." "Of course. What would you like to ask? Are you mad at us?" The question broke my heart. "Oh, honey, I'm not mad at you or David. I could never be mad at you. But you don't come to our house anymore. And Daddy says you don't want to see us." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar pain of Michael's distortions. "Emma, that's not exactly right. I do want to see you and David. I want to see you very much." Then why don't you come visit? How do you explain adult relationship dynamics to a 9-year-old? How do you tell a child that her father and grandmother can't agree on what their relationship should look like? Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements about things, and until we work out our disagreement, it's hard for us to spend time together. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. Could I come visit you instead? I would love that, Emma. But you'd have to ask your mommy and daddy if that would be okay. I already did. Daddy said maybe someday, but not right now. Maybe someday, but not right now. Michael was using his children as weapons, keeping them from me as punishment for refusing to accept his terms for our relationship. "Well," I said carefully, "sometimes, maybe someday becomes yes, if we wait long enough." "Grandma, where are you right now? It sounds different." "I'm in California, sweetheart. I'm visiting San Francisco." "Wow. Are you there by yourself?" "I am." "Aren't you scared to travel all by yourself?" "Not at all. I'm having a wonderful time. I've seen sea lions and rode on a cable car and ate the most delicious sourdough bread." "That sounds fun. Maybe I could go with you sometime." "Maybe you could," I said, knowing that someday if Emma truly wanted to maintain a relationship with me, she would find a way to do it, with or without her father's permission. We talked for a few more minutes before Michael came on the line. "Mom, sorry about that. Emma got hold of my phone. It's fine. I enjoyed talking to her. She's been asking about you lately. She misses you." "I miss her too. I miss both of them. Maybe we could arrange something. Maybe they could call you more often. Maybe. Always maybe with Michael. Never definite plans or commitments." "That would be nice," I said, though I doubted it would happen. Mom, where are you calling from? Emma said something about California. I'm in San Francisco. I decided to take a trip. There was a pause. By yourself? Yes. How can you afford to travel to California? There it was. The real question. How could someone living on Social Security afford cross-country travel? I saved up, I said, which was not exactly a lie. You saved up enough for a trip to California? Mom? That must have cost thousands of dollars. It did. I don't understand. Last year you said you couldn't afford to help with Emma's surgery, but now you're taking expensive vacations. And there it was. The resentment he'd been carrying for months. The anger about my refusal to give him money for Emma's medical expenses. Michael, those are two separate things. Not being able to help with a $3,000 medical emergency doesn't mean I can't save money over time for something I really want to do. But if you had savings, why didn't you help us when we needed it? Because I don't have $3,000 in savings. I had enough savings to take this trip, but not enough to cover Emma's surgery. Those are different amounts of money. It was partially true. Before the lottery, I wouldn't have had $3,000 available for emergencies. But now, sitting in this San Francisco cafe with my lottery winnings safely invested, I was maintaining the fiction of financial limitation while arguing about money with my son. The irony was not lost on me. I still don't understand how you can afford this, Michael said. I don't need you to understand it. I'm an adult, and I can make my own financial decisions. Mom, I'm just concerned. If you're spending your savings on travel, what will you do if you have a real emergency? I'll handle it the same way I've handled every other emergency in my life. I'll figure it out. But if you had $3,000 available for a trip, you could have helped us with Emma's surgery and still had money left over for emergencies. Michael, stop. We're not having this conversation again. I just think, no. I know what you think. You think I chose a vacation over my granddaughter's health. You think I'm selfish and uncaring. You've made your opinion very clear. That's not what I think. It's exactly what you think. And it's exactly what you thought when you called me unreasonable and unloving for not being able to produce $1,500 when you demanded it. I never called you unreasonable and unloving. You didn't have to. It was obvious from your tone and your behavior afterward. We were quiet for a moment, both of us probably realizing that this conversation was following the same pattern as all our recent conversations. Him criticizing my choices, me defending them, both of us getting nowhere. Mom, he said finally, I don't want to fight with you. I just worry about your financial situation. You don't need to worry about my financial situation. I'm doing fine. But if you're spending large amounts of money on travel, Michael, I'm 72 years old. If I want to see California before I die, this might be my last chance to do it. Some things are more important than having money in the bank. That stopped him short, probably because it was the first time I'd mentioned my own mortality in the context of our arguments about money and priorities. Mom, you're not going to die anytime soon. How do you know that? How do you know I have plenty of time to wait for you to decide you want a relationship with me? How do you know I'll still be here when you finally figure out how to balance your busy schedule with visiting your mother? Mom, that's not fair. It's completely fair. You've been treating me like I'll be available forever whenever you get around to making time for me, but I won't be available forever. Nobody is. He was quiet for a long moment. Are you okay health-wise? I'm fine health-wise, but I'm not fine relationship-wise. I'm tired of being an afterthought in your life. I'm tired of being someone you remember to call when you don't have anything more interesting to do. Mom? I'm sitting in a beautiful cafe in San Francisco right now, watching the sunset over the bay, and I'm happier than I've been in years. Do you know why? Because I'm not waiting for my phone to ring. I'm not hoping someone will remember to invite me somewhere. I'm not wondering if my own children think about me or miss me. I'm just living my life. That sounds lonely. It's the opposite of lonely. It's free. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up, and I could tell that Michael was genuinely confused by this version of his mother, who traveled alone and seemed content with her independence. The old version of me would have used that conversation as an opening to rebuild our relationship. I would have focused on his concern about my health, his surprise at my independence, his children's desire to spend time with me. I would have seen opportunities for reconciliation and pursued them eagerly. But this version of me, sitting in a San Francisco cafe with a secret fortune in the bank and a life I'd built on my own terms, wasn't interested in pursuing anyone who had already made it clear they weren't interested in being pursued. That brings me to last Tuesday morning, when everything came full circle in a way I never could have expected. I was in my apartment making coffee and planning my day when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Michael's name, which was unusual since we rarely spoke anymore and never in the morning. Hi, Michael. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. His tone was different than usual. Not warm exactly, but not dismissive either. He sounded focused, almost businesslike. Okay. Have you come into money recently? Any money at all? My heart started beating faster, but I kept my voice steady. Why would you ask that? Just answer the question, please. Have you received any inheritance? Won any money? Gotten any lump sum payments for any reason? Michael, why are you asking me this? Because Sarah saw you at a restaurant in Manhattan last week with an elderly man she didn't recognize. You were paying for dinner, and when you paid, she saw you pull out what looked like a very expensive credit card. Sarah had seen me. I'd been having dinner with Mr. Rodriguez from my book club, a lovely widower who had become a friend. I had indeed paid for dinner, using the premium credit card I'd obtained once my lottery winnings were invested. Sarah was watching me at a restaurant? She wasn't watching you. She happened to see you. She said you looked different, well-dressed, confident. She said the restaurant looked expensive. Am I not allowed to eat at nice restaurants? Mom, just answer the question. Have you come into money? I could have lied. I could have continued the fiction of financial limitation that I'd been maintaining for over a year, but something in Michael's tone told me that he already suspected the truth. Yes, I said quietly. I have. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long that I wondered if the call had been disconnected. How much? He finally asked. Enough. Mom, how much money are we talking about? We're talking about enough money that I don't have to worry about paying rent or buying groceries or affording medical care. We're talking about enough money that I can travel and eat at nice restaurants and live comfortably. How long have you had this money? About 15 months. Another long silence. 15 months. You've had significant money for 15 months and you didn't tell us? That's right. Why? Because I wanted to see how you treated me when you thought I had nothing to offer you. Mom, that's insane. Is it? Is it insane to want to know if your children love you for who you are or for what you can give them? We love you for who you are. Do you? Because when I couldn't give you $1,500 for Emma's surgery, you were angry with me for months. You treated me like I was selfish and uncaring. But now that you know I actually had the money all along, how do you feel? He didn't answer immediately, and I could practically hear him thinking. I feel confused, he said finally. Confused about what? About why you would let us struggle financially when you could have helped easily. Michael, you didn't struggle financially. You found the money for Emma's surgery somewhere else just like I knew you would. Jennifer's parents helped. You figured it out. It wasn't really about needing my help, but you could have made it easier for us. Yes, I could have. Just like you could have made things easier for me when I was grieving your father, when I was adjusting to this apartment, when I was lonely and looking for connection with my family, but you didn't. That's different. How is it different? Because we're talking about money to help a sick child, and I was talking about emotional support to help a grieving, lonely woman. Why is your need more important than mine was? Because Emma is a child, and I'm your mother. I'm the woman who sacrificed everything to raise you, who worked multiple jobs to pay for your education, who put your needs above my own for your entire life. Doesn't that count for something? Of course it counts for something. Then why didn't it count when I was asking you to spend time with me, to include me in your life, to treat me with basic respect and consideration? Mom, we're getting off track here. The issue is that you lied to us about having money. I didn't lie. I told you I couldn't afford to give you $1,500, and that was true. I couldn't afford to give you money that I might need for my own security and well-being. But you had the money, and you had the ability to spend time with me, to call me regularly, to visit me occasionally, to include me in family plans. But you chose not to use that ability. How is what I did any different from what you did? There was another long silence. How much money are we talking about? He asked again. Why does that matter? Because if you're wealthy, really wealthy, then everything changes. Changes how? It changes everything about our relationship. It changes how we plan for the future, how we think about family decisions, how you treat me. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. You're already thinking about how my money might benefit you and your family. You're already changing how you see me based on what I might be able to give you. Mom, that's not fair. It's completely fair. 30 seconds ago, you were angry that I hadn't helped you when you thought I could. Now you're thinking about how I can help you in the future. You're proving exactly why I didn't tell you about the money in the first place. So what was your plan? To keep the secret forever? My plan was to see if you could learn to value me for who I am, rather than what I can do for you. My plan was to see if you could become the kind of son who deserved to know about my good fortune. And what's your conclusion? My conclusion is that you're more interested in my money than you are in me. That's not true. Michael, in the 15 months since I won this money, have you called to check on me? Have you visited? Have you invited me to spend time with your family? Have you shown any interest in my life or my well-being? We've talked. We've had exactly 4 conversations in 15 months. All of them initiated by me. All of them brief and superficial. The only time you reached out to me was when you wanted to offer me guest room privileges in your new house, after Jennifer got her promotion, and you were feeling financially generous. I was trying to rebuild our relationship. You were trying to be charitable to the poor old woman you thought I was. But you weren't trying to have a real relationship with me. So what happens now? Now you know the truth. I'm not poor. I'm not desperate for your attention. I'm not sitting in my apartment waiting for you to remember I exist. I have money, I have friends, I have a life that doesn't revolve around trying to earn love from people who are determined not to give it. Mom, that's harsh. It's honest. What do you want from me? I want you to think about that question and figure out the answer for yourself. I want you to decide what kind of relationship you want with me, based on who we both are, not on what either of us can give the other person. And if I decide I want a real relationship, then you'll have to prove it. Not with words or promises or good intentions, but with actions. Consistent actions over time. And if I don't, then we'll continue the way we've been, with minimal contact and surface-level conversations when necessary. And either way, you're keeping the money? There it was. The real question he'd been building up to. Michael, the money is mine. I want it, I've invested it responsibly, and I'll use it however I choose. It was never going to be your money, or Sarah's money, or your children's money. It's my money, for my security, and my choices. But when I die, you'll inherit whatever I choose to leave you, just like every other parent and child in the world. But what I choose to leave will depend on the relationship we build between now and then. So you're bribing us to be good children? I'm doing exactly what you did when you withheld emotional support until it was convenient to give it. I'm making my generosity contingent on how I'm treated. If that feels like bribery to you, maybe you understand better now how it felt when you made your love contingent on my not being too needy or demanding. We talked for another hour after that, circling around the same issues, the same resentments, the same fundamental disagreements about what family relationships should look like. By the end of the conversation, I could tell that Michael was recalibrating everything he thought he knew about me, about our relationship, about his own behavior over the past few years. He wasn't apologetic, exactly, but he was thoughtful in a way he hadn't been before. For the first time, he seemed to be considering the possibility that his treatment of me had been genuinely harmful, rather than simply imperfect. Mom, he said as we were ending the call, I need some time to process all this. Take all the time you need. And I want you to know, the money doesn't change how I feel about you. Michael, the money has already changed how you feel about me. It changed how you felt about me the moment you knew I had it. The question is whether it will change how you treat me. What do you mean? I mean, will you suddenly have time in your schedule for regular phone calls? Will you suddenly remember to invite me to family events? Will you suddenly decide that your children should spend time with their grandmother? Or will you treat me the same way you've been treating me, regardless of what's in my bank account? He didn't have an immediate answer, which told me he was genuinely thinking about the question. I guess we'll find out. He said finally. Yes, I agreed. We will. That was a week ago. I haven't heard from Michael since, though Sarah called yesterday to tell me that Michael had told her about our conversation. Mom, I can't believe you've been rich this whole time, she said, and I could hear the hurt in her voice. I'm not rich, Sarah. I'm comfortable. Same thing. No, it's not. Rich people don't live in one-bedroom apartments in Queens. But I have enough money that I don't have to worry about paying bills or affording food or covering medical expenses. How much is enough? Enough that I can live the way I want to live without depending on anyone else for support. Michael said you won the lottery. That's right. When? About 15 months ago. 15 months? Mom, why didn't you tell us? I explained to Sarah the same things I had explained to Michael. My desire to understand our relationships without the complication of money. My need to know if they loved me for who I was rather than what I could provide. But Mom, we do love you for who you are. Do you? When was the last time you called me just because you missed me? I call you all the time. You call me when you need something or when you're bored or when you feel obligated. When was the last time you called because you genuinely wanted to talk to me? Sarah was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I never really thought about it that way. I've thought about it that way for years. Mom, that's not fair. I've been dealing with my divorce and work stress and trying to get my life together. I haven't had the emotional energy to be the kind of daughter you wanted me to be. The emotional energy. As if loving your mother required energy that might be better spent elsewhere. Sarah, I never wanted you to be anything other than yourself. I just wanted to feel like I mattered to you. You do matter to me. When? How do you show me that I matter? I don't know. I guess I assumed you knew. How would I know if you never tell me or show me? We talked for another hour, and like my conversation with Michael, it was circular and frustrating and ultimately revealing. Sarah, like Michael, seemed genuinely surprised to learn that I had felt neglected and undervalued. She seemed genuinely unaware that her treatment of me had been hurtful, but she also seemed genuinely willing to consider changing our relationship if I would tell her exactly what I wanted from her. Just tell me what to do, Mom, and I'll do it. Sarah, that's not how relationships work. I can't give you a list of tasks to complete to prove you love me. You have to figure out how to show love in ways that feel genuine to you. But what if I do it wrong? Then you'll learn and do better next time. That's how people learn to love each other well, by paying attention and making adjustments and caring enough to keep trying. It seems so complicated. It's not complicated. It's just unfamiliar because we've never done it before. What do you mean? I mean, I've spent your entire life making our relationship easy for you. I've done all the emotional work, made all the effort, initiated all the contact. You've never had to think about how to maintain our relationship because I was doing all the thinking for both of us. And now you want me to do half the work? I want you to do your half of the work. I want you to consider my feelings the way I've always considered yours. I want you to make an effort the way I've always made an effort. And if I can't, if I don't know how, then you'll learn, or we won't have much of a relationship. Those are the choices. Sarah seemed to understand that I was serious in a way that maybe Michael hadn't fully grasped yet. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happier now? With the money and the independence and everything? Much happier. Even without seeing us as much? Especially without seeing you as much, because now when I do see you, it's because you choose to see me, not because you feel obligated. I never felt obligated. Sarah, every interaction we've had for the past 5 years has felt obligated. Phone calls because you thought you should check on me. Visits because it was a holiday or special occasion. Conversations that felt like items you were checking off your to-do list. I didn't mean for it to feel that way. I know you didn't, but that's how it felt. And that's why I pulled back. And the money made it easier to pull back because you didn't need us anymore? The money made it possible for me to pull back without being afraid of the consequences. It made it possible for me to choose self-respect over security. We finished that conversation on a more hopeful note than my conversation with Michael had ended. Sarah seemed genuinely interested in learning how to have a more authentic relationship with me, even if she wasn't sure how to do it. Mom, will you be patient with me while I figure this out? I'll be patient with genuine effort. I won't be patient with lip service or empty promises. Fair enough. This morning I received a text from Emma, sent from Jennifer's phone. Hi, Grandma Margaret. Daddy said I could ask if you want to have lunch with me sometime. Just me and you. Love, Emma. Just me and you. Not a family obligation or a special occasion or a duty visit, but a specific request from my granddaughter for one-on-one time together. I texted back, I would love to have lunch with just you, Emma. Ask your parents when would be a good time and I'll make it happen. Within an hour, Jennifer had texted me directly. Margaret, Emma really wants to spend time with you. Would next Saturday work for lunch? I could drive her to your neighborhood around noon. Direct communication. A specific time and plan. No vague promises or maybe someday language. Saturday at noon would be perfect, I texted back. There's a nice family restaurant near me that Emma would enjoy. Sounds great. She's very excited. Emma is very excited to spend time with her grandmother. When was the last time anyone in my family was excited to spend time with me? I don't know what will happen with my relationship with Michael or Sarah in the long term. I don't know if they're capable of the kind of authentic, mutually caring relationships I've decided I want, but I know that I'm okay either way. The lottery money gave me security, but more importantly, it gave me choice. The choice to say no to relationships that diminish me. The choice to insist on being treated with respect. The choice to build a life that makes me happy regardless of other people's decisions about loving me. At 72, I've learned something that I wish I'd understood decades earlier. You can't love people into loving you back. You can't sacrifice your way into being valued. You can't earn respect by accepting disrespect. But you can choose to love yourself enough to walk away from relationships that harm you. You can choose to believe that you deserve better treatment than people are willing to give you. You can choose to build a life that doesn't depend on other people's approval or attention. The money made those choices easier, but it didn't make them possible. They were always possible. I just had to be brave enough to make them. I'm looking forward to lunch with Emma on Saturday. I'm curious to see what kind of relationship is possible with someone who actively wants to spend time with me, without obligation or guilt or complicated family dynamics. I'm also curious to see what happens with Michael and Sarah over the coming months. Will they make genuine efforts to change how they relate to me? Will they continue to see me primarily in terms of what I can do for them? Will they learn to value me for who I am rather than what I can provide? Time will tell. And for the first time in years, I'm not anxious about the answers to those questions. Whatever happens, I know I'll be okay. I have my own life now. A life that I've built according to my own values and preferences. A life that includes travel and friendship and art and books and all the things I love. A life that makes room for family relationships that enhance my happiness, but doesn't depend on them for my basic sense of worth. It took a lottery ticket to teach me that lesson, but it was worth every penny I spent on all those losing tickets over the years. Have you ever wondered if the people in your life love you for who you are or for what you can give them? Have you ever felt like you were pouring love and energy into relationships that didn't give anything back? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel. Sometimes the most important conversations start with someone being brave enough to share their truth.